What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. So I'm really excited to bring you guys today the Hudson H9 from Hudson Manufacturing. Now very early in the year this gun was announced and it was showcased at SHOT Show 2017. But here we are now in December of 2017. This gun was shipped off to distributors, right around November. It has taken a while for this gun to really reach the market. It's seen a couple of reviewers and there have been a couple out there, but they are very rare right now. In fact, in Kansas City, to my knowledge, there are only 3. Now, there could be a couple more in a couple of little shops, but that's pretty unlikely. I think it's the story throughout the majority of the country right now. These are a little bit scarce. Hudson is releasing them for sure, but they are in very small batches. So if you're interested in looking for these, just keep after it. I think eventually you'll find one. They're trying to get them out as fast as they can, from what I understand, but they are in pretty limited quantities. Now, I happened to stumble upon this just a couple of days ago at a store called Frontier Justice. There are 2, one in Kansas, one in Missouri. I went over to the Kansas one and just happened to stumble upon this, so I appreciate them having this in stock. My store that I go to, my home away from home, Center Fire Shooting Sports, has been desperately trying to get one, and they just really aren't available. So again, keep after it if you are looking for them. So let's go ahead and knock some specs out of the way of this guy. And of course it is unloaded. I do have an unloaded magazine in here as usual. So from a length standpoint, we are at 7.63 inches. The height is 5.23 inches. The barrel length is 4.28 inches. The width, I'll give you a good look at that. It's 1.24 inches. The weight unloaded is 34 ounces. So it's a pretty hefty chunk, no doubt about that. From a magazine capacity standpoint, it is 15 rounds. It does come with 3 steel magazines. So at least for the money, and this comes in MSRP around $1,150 to my knowledge. At least it has 3 magazines, and it does have some other great upper end features on it as well. So of course we'll talk a little bit more about value and what you get as we go along. The slide finish is a nitride finish. And of course, the frame and the slide are all steel. The action is where things start to get a little bit different. Now, you'll notice that this looks kind of like a 1911 style trigger, and it is, but it really is a striker-fired firearm. In fact, we took the internals apart earlier today, at least the internals for the striker pin or firing pin, whatever you want to say, and some of those components, and they actually are very reminiscent of something like an FN, like an FNS, something like that. So, so it definitely is a striker-fired firearm, no doubt about that. Of course, we'll talk about the trigger and disassembly a little bit later on in the video. From a safety standpoint, the only external safety right now, of course, is going to be this safety lever in the trigger right here. Now, you'll notice there actually is a little bump right here and also right here. According to Hudson, they are going to have safety levers for the right side, for the left side, and then also an ambidextrous model. So if safeties are a concern for you, or if perhaps your state requires it, they are going to have those options a little bit later on down the road. I'm not sure exactly when, however. Now, from a modularity standpoint, one thing that's also very unique about this, well, somewhat unique, I should say, it does have a sub-chassis in it. So the serialized part actually does come out. The entire trigger module comes out of this firearm, very reminiscent of something like a 6-hour P320 or a Beretta APX. So that would mean perhaps that Hudson is going to come out with maybe some different frames or maybe different caliber exchange kits or something to that nature down the road. I don't know that for sure. Maybe they won't, but I suppose they are at least setting themselves up to be able to do so if they decide that they want to. So just kind of something to note. So from a feature standpoint, here's where things start to get really fun. Now you'll notice, first off, from a grip standpoint, the grip panels right here on the left and the right side, those are removable, of course, with an Allen wrench, just kind of like you would a 1911, something like that. These do look like they are proprietary panels. Now, I don't know if Hudson's going to have some different options, perhaps, in their store when it gets up and running. It's not yet. But I imagine some aftermarket companies will probably also offer something. These are a G10 grip. And from a texture standpoint, they're pretty mild. They're not terrifically aggressive. There are much more aggressive grips out there on the market than these. However, I will say it is extraordinarily comfortable, if nothing else, and I have somewhat sweaty hands. and the gun never really went anywhere. So I think the grips are doing their job, even though they are pretty subtle. From a backstrap standpoint, now these are also G10 back straps made by Hogue, from what I understand, and there is a fair amount of checkering here. Again, it's not terrifically aggressive, but it does seem to bite well enough to keep that gun in place, and it's very comfortable. I mean, it feels really good. It's a nice G10 material. And then from a front strap standpoint, hopefully I can capture that in the light a little bit, it is milled right here into the frame. Now, I will say the checkering is incredibly mild. I would have actually have liked to have seen this be a little bit more aggressive than it is. Again, the gun didn't really go anywhere, but just a little bit more bite in this would probably be an okay thing, and I think a lot of people would probably feel that way. I think people will be changing out these panels when they get an opportunity to do so. Now, another feature about this, it's kind of unique, and hopefully you'll be able to see this okay. If I can get the camera to autofocus, perhaps I'll need to help the camera out. There we go. So you'll notice that there's a little bit of a divot in the bottom of the frame right here, as well as the top of the magazine base plate. And this is really here to help clear any malfunctions or anything like that. So they've chosen to do this kind of like the Glock Gen 5 has done it. However, a little bit more tastefully done, I think. Although I like the Glock Gen 5, I think that over-exaggerated cutouts probably more than it needs to be. Now, I would have liked to have seen these magazines be able to be ripped out from the sides, but still, it's nice that they have this here just in case something does happen. One nice little attention to detail here is this insignia for Hudson right here on the base plates. I think that's pretty cool, and that's actually the button to take the base plate off and do any sort of maintenance or anything like that with the magazine. So just kind of a neat little attention to detail. Now, from a magazine release standpoint, it is not ambidextrous out of the box. However, with just a simple turn of a screw, you can actually take this apart and you can swap it out. So it really is ambidextrous, again, not out of the box. However, from a slide lock, slide release standpoint, it is ambidextrous out of the box. So you do have that going for you, if nothing else. Now, from a takedown standpoint, you'll see that there isn't really a standard takedown lever or takedown tabs or anything like we are often used to seeing, but instead there's this recessed panel right here. And you'll notice on the other side there's actually a little button right here, and all you have to do is lock the slide open. You'll press the little button, and you'll flip your takedown tab down, and you're good to go. Again, I will disassemble this a little bit later on in the video, but that's your disassembly right there. Now, there are, I'll fix my zoom there a little bit. There is an accessory rail, of course, for your lights, lasers, grenade launchers, things like that, which is to be expected, especially at this price point, $1,150. Now, from a backstrap standpoint or a beaver tail standpoint, it definitely does have a nice pronounced beaver tail right here, which is really cool. One thing I have noticed, however, and I'll try and capture this in the light as best I can, hopefully you'll notice, and hopefully you'll see, there are a couple of little spaces right there between the beaver tail and the rest of the frame. And what some people were noticing, especially if they have meatier hands than I do, those little indentions right there will actually kind of bite you a little bit as you're shooting. So it's kind of interesting that they left these little gaps right here instead of making it all flush. Didn't bother me one bit, but some people did notice that. It's nice that they have this beaver tail here, however, because, and I will tell you, if you're somebody who's real into bore axis or something like that, man, if you'll notice, that bore axis is unbelievably low, and I'm not gripping it probably as well as I should since I'm reaching around a camera, but this thing sits about as low in the hand as you could possibly get. That's really impressive, and part of the reason why is because of all this stuff right here. This is your recoil spring and guide rod assembly. So they've lowered this down here right in front of the actual trigger guard itself and put this all in one piece. So it almost looks like it's a light or a laser or something like that, not a grenade launcher, but it really is not. It's actually just part of that recoil assembly right there. Again, we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. But that's really it from a frame standpoint. As we move up the slide, of course, you'll notice that there are front and back serrations as you would expect. And they are really nice. They don't have too much of a bite, but they're just enough to really make sure you can get a good grip on this, even if your hands are a little bit slick or oily, whatever the case case may be. So they've done a nice job with that. And you'll also notice, and I'm trying to capture this kind of in the light a little bit, that the slide really, it's got several different contours to it on several different places, and they've tried to kind of change things up a little bit, and I think it's really cool. I think it's kind of a neat design, something very different, and just to kind of break up the monotony of slides. I mean, some slides like maybe Glocks or something like that, which I'm a fan of Glocks as well, but they're pretty boring from a slide standpoint. And then of course it does have the Hudson logo right here, and again, it's very tasteful. I mean, it doesn't leap out at you. It's not overly done or anything like that. There really isn't any other writing on the firearm aside from the serial number, so they've done a pretty good job with that. Now, from a sight standpoint, the front sight is a Trijicon HD sight, so they give you a really nice upgraded sight right out of the box. And then the back sights are just a flat black, and they are serrated to reduce glare. So I think it's a really kind of a nice sight setup. It's pretty quick to acquire, especially with that high definition front end. And then on the top of the slide, it is serrated as well to reduce glare. So again, I think Hudson has done a really good job putting all of this together and making it a nice, neat package, and it's really well done. I mean, everything is finely finished. I think their attention to detail and their fit and finish is really top notch. It's been very impressive. So that's really it from a specs and a feature standpoint. Of course, when we get back from shooting, we're going to be taking a look at the trigger, and we're going to disassemble the gun, and then some final thoughts. So be sure to stay tuned. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, the Hudson H9 is an absolute joy to shoot. I passed it around to 7 or 8 different people over the course of the last couple of days of shooting, and I put 500 rounds through it, 250 each day, and everybody remarked that it was a lot of fun. It felt good, it was fun to hold and to shoot, and it was accurate. Now you guys all know I'm not the most accurate shooter. I don't claim to be. I'm not a bullseye shooter, but I look for guns that put good quality rounds down range, center mass, and it's just a lot of fun to shoot. So this absolutely fits the bill. Now, a couple of things that I attribute that to, first and foremost, is again that low bore axis. So it really does reduce that muzzle flip. It's a pretty flat shooter, but then it also reduces at least a perceived recoil, if nothing else. So that makes it really nice. But then there is also the trigger, which we're going to take a look at now. So again, I remarked that this is it's a very 1911 style firearm overall, but it really is a striker fire. Now, that trigger looks like a 1911 trigger with the exception of this safety lever right here that is upside down. So you basically press it up to actuate, but then once you do, go ahead and get my finger in there, once you depress that, it really doesn't have anywhere to go. I mean, basically you're at the wall, and then there's the brake. You've got your brake, and it's a nice, crisp, audible brake, and then your reset, is right there. Now the reset is definitely tactile. You can really feel it, although from an audible standpoint, it's not quite as impressive. Now I know when you're shooting, you're not really listening for a reset, but from a review standpoint at least, there are definitely some other guns with better resets. But overall, I think the trigger feels very nice. And we'll do this again. So you depress your safety lever, you're at the wall, there's your brake, and then your reset, and you're right back there at the start. So once again, I mean, I think this trigger is very nice. I think Hudson did a really good job with it. It's very smooth. There's just not a lot to it. It just feels good. So from a disassembly standpoint, the Hudson H9 is actually pretty easy to take apart. Now that I've said that, of course, it probably won't cooperate on camera, because having a camera in between me and the gun is a little bit challenging, and any other excuses I can think of, I'll let you know as we go along. But I use the base plate of a magazine, and I've said this several times in the takes of this video. I'll eventually break this magazine doing this probably, but I take the round end first just to get the button partially depressed. And then I take the pointed end and just press it in, and it's good to go. And then you'll notice on the other side that lever has now popped out, and it's actually partially turned. And all I have to do is turn it the rest of the way, and we're good to go. So I release the slide. Now you'll notice that slide does not come off. You do have to pull the trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger, and then hopefully, and it does, hey, the gun actually just comes right apart. Now a couple of things to field strip. That's it. So you've got one less component than you do in a lot of firearms that we're all used to. The guide rod and spring assembly do not come out of the frame. They are actually a part of it. Now, I'm sure they do come out with maybe a tool or twisting it or something like that. I have not attempted to do that. I haven't had a need to, and I probably won't unless I run into some sort of problem or something like that. But from a construction standpoint, I mean, everything is very clean, and it's very well put together. I mean, I'm starting to see a little bit of wear on the slides. Again, there are 500 rounds through this so far, but that's really to be expected. Metal on metal, of course, and you just have to make sure that you keep things well oiled like you would any 1911 style firearm, but really any firearm these days. I think it's probably a good idea. But again, the components are really nice. I mean, the rails are beefy enough. Everything just looks really nice, and that's that chassis system in there that just pops right out. I again have not tried to do that. I'm not even sure how to do it just yet, but I know that capability is there. And then we've got our barrel right here. It does look a little bit different than a lot of the other barrels that we're used to these days. And it basically just locks right into the frame right here, just like this, in case you're wondering. So it just stays where it is. It's got a little bit of give, of course, as that slide actuates forward and back. And then from a slide standpoint, I mean, I think this is really where you can tell Hudson's attention to detail and their craftsmanship. I think they've actually done a really good job with this. I mean, everything looks really nice. It looks really clean. All the lines are there. There are no burrs or anything like that. So I think they're the folks who check for fit and finish and craftsmanship. I think they do a really good job. I mean, just very honestly, I mean, I've taken apart a lot of guns over the years, and some are just better looking than others, basically. So again, quality of construction is really good. It's very easy to take apart and maintain from a field stripping and maintenance standpoint. And then putting together, I actually keep the slide upside down, and then I put the frame on it like this. And where you start to run into a problem is getting that guide rod in. You have to kind of, and of course I'm doing this on camera, so I can't really see what I'm doing here. So I'm sort of having to go a little bit by fortune, if nothing else. So you kind of have to get it in there. It's going to fight me on camera. Unfortunately, we've gone this far. Boy, that's a shame, isn't it? It will go in there. There it goes. Okay. So then we lock it in. Again, if there isn't a camera in front of you, it is significantly easier. It actually just kind of pops right in. And then your release, you just flip back up like this and press it in. It needs to be flat like that, and that's going to fight me too, probably. There we go. And then check for function, and we are good to go. So although I don't make a very good showing of it, again, with the setup I have here, it actually is very easy to take apart. It's very easy to maintain. Everything looks really good in there. And that, once again, goes to the attention to detail that Hudson at least seemingly has put into this gun. So to give you a quick idea of what the size of the Hudson actually is, because I think in pictures it looks a little bit bigger than it really is. I've got a Glock 19 Gen 5 right here, and of course the Hudson on top, and I've lined them up basically into the slide to into the slide. I'm not counting the beaver tail with this, but just kind of the end of the slides here. And so we've got about a 1/2 of an inch difference between the Hudson and the Glock, so not a lot of difference there. And then from a height standpoint, see if I can get these guys to stand up next to each other and then lift it up. So once again, it's about a 1/2 an inch or so difference between the two, if you can see that okay. And then from a width standpoint, get these guys to stand up here, there's just not a lot of difference between the two. I mean, there really isn't. So from a size standpoint, although the Hudson is bigger and it is absolutely heavier by about 10 ounces or so, it really otherwise is not a lot bigger than a standard Glock 19. So just to give you a little bit of a reference. So what do I think of the Hudson H9 overall? Well, so far I've been really impressed. Now, on my first day of shooting, I did run into a couple of problems. Actually, it was one problem several times. You guys know that I load 10 rounds in my magazines. Of course, Kansas will allow more than that. I just prefer it. I'm a little bit OCD, and it helps me count the rounds as I go through my day. But I would load a fresh magazine in, so the gun, of course, would be locked open. This would have 10 rounds in it. And I would load it, and I would either release it with the slide release, or I would do an overhand rack, something like that. And for whatever reason, and again, this happened probably 6 or 7 times, the round would get caught, and it would get caught at a slant right about here. So it would not go fully into the chamber, unfortunately. It would just get caught like this. Now, throughout the day, it got a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better, to a point where I was able to just tap the back of the slide and be able to go in. And there were a couple of theories to that, one of which is the tolerances are probably pretty tight in here, like a lot of 1911s, especially where the extractor is. So it could be that that extractor had to get worked in just a little bit. There could have been a burr in there. Now, I did clean it very thoroughly after that first day. Took a dry brush and really got in there, and I just really tried to clean the gun up quite a bit. And then the other theory is that there could be a little bit of a coating in the inside of the barrel that had to get worn away just a little bit after they checked for finish, for fitment rather. So a couple of different theories. All I know is that on day 2, I did not have that error one time. And of course, throughout the actual shooting itself, I didn't have a single malfunction. Nothing happened. So it was only when I was loading those first rounds in. So it might have been a first day sort of deal. I'm going to kind of keep an eye on that and see if it happens again. Of course, I'll report that back to you guys if that's the case. I'm not alarmed about it. Nobody else was alarmed about it. I talked to 2 different gunsmiths. Neither one of them said they were concerned at all, especially with this under the assumption that this has some tolerances kind of like a nicer 1911, which it might. So again, it was kind of an interesting first day, but day 2 was absolutely fantastic. It loaded everything. So what do I think of the Hudson again? Overall, it's $1,150 MSRP. It's a pretty expensive firearm. However, you're getting a really well put together firearm. You're getting the 3 magazines. You're getting really nice sights. You're getting really good fit and finish. It's an unusual firearm, if nothing else. I mean, I think you're sort of paying admission to get something that's a little bit different than a lot of the other people that you're probably shooting with at the range, and you're probably going to get a little bit of attention when you have it. So it's just kind of a cool, unique, different gun, and I'm hoping that Hudson keeps on going and perhaps brings out some other products that are innovative kind of like this, or some other things that fall into this platform, but just some different variations of it. So I've been very impressed. It's been a lot of fun, and I think it's worth the money so far. That may change over time, but again, so far it's been a delight. So I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about this. If you have any experience with the Hudson, if you've handled them, if you own one, I'd love to hear about your experiences with that, of course. If you have any questions about it, let me know. So I'm looking forward to reading all those comments you're going to put down below. Thanks again so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.